This is the Tesla Cybertruck, and it's the most talked about, most anticipated, most hyped car so far this decade. It looks absolutely insane. It has insane performance. It comes from a company run by an insane person. There is nothing else like this on the planet. And today I'm going to review the Cybertruck and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Check it out at carsandbids.com. Before I get started, big news, I launched a podcast. This car podcast is now live. The first episode is already out and new episodes are coming every Friday. Me and my friends are going to talk car news, car market trends, and take viewer questions all in a tight hour every week. So be sure to check out this car podcast with new episodes coming every Friday. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Tesla Cybertruck. I am so excited for this that I'm going to skip all the basics. Most people already know about this truck and dive right into the quirks and features, starting with the absolutely ridiculous design of this truck. It's all about angles, sharp angles at everywhere you look. There are no curves on this truck. It's all intended to be angular and sharp and futuristic and totally different from everything else on the road, which in fact is true. The only curved thing on the outside is the wheels, and even then the wheel arches are angular, as you can see, just like the rest of the truck. In fact, the angles of this truck are so sharp that there are places where you could clearly cut yourself on it. You can see right here, that's a pretty sharp angle. It looks kind of scary if you walk too close. Same deal up front. This angle in particular looks like if you walk too close, it might actually draw blood. The Cybertruck is just that brutal. Now, the other interesting thing about the Cybertruck's design is its material, because the Cybertruck is almost entirely made of unpainted stainless steel. This is totally different than the painted sheet metal you see in basically every other vehicle. It gives it a totally different appearance, and it wears a little bit differently. In fact, the early reports about premature wear on the stainless steel panels of the Cybertruck have already caused a lot of early Cybertruck owners to wrap their trucks in a different color or just to protect the body panels. Regardless, it is totally different, just like the way this truck looks. Now, at first glance, when you look at the Cybertruck, it seems like it's just one giant silver monolith, a totally minimalist exterior design without any adornments to break up the big triangle that this truck is. But as you start to look closer, you start to notice all of the little things peppered throughout the exterior that do break up the monolithic shape, but only if you notice them. We'll start with the most obvious, the rear view mirrors, which borrow the angled design from the rest of the truck. They're triangular instead of, well, anything else because they mimic the look of the truck itself. Next, you move on to the windshield, where you can see the mono wiper, the giant windshield wiper that is tucked on to the very side of the windshield, as you can see. Now, this is a massive windshield, and it is a massive windshield wiper. And according to Tesla, the reason for putting it here along the side of the windshield is actually increasing the truck's range. If you mounted the wiper horizontally, it would break up the aerodynamics of the truck. And so mounting it here allows for better airflow over the truck. And it lets Tesla hide the wiper a little bit better, so when you look at the truck, you don't see it. You just see one giant flat plane of glass. Next up, in terms of hidden exterior adornments, let's talk badging. There is no Tesla badge anywhere on this truck, but if you look closely, you can see it says Foundation Series right here on the front fender. You gotta look very closely because it's kind of silver on silver, but it is in there on the early Foundation Series trucks like this one. You also have Foundation Series printed on the tailgate. You can see it right here, but again, you gotta look very closely. You wouldn't necessarily necessarily notice it otherwise. But again, there is no Tesla logo anywhere. Front, back, wheels, none. No Tesla branding on this truck. Then again, you don't really need it. If you see this truck, you know what it is. Next, we're talking exterior stuff, so let's talk wheels. How do you design wheels for a monolith? The answer is, well, these weren't the wheels that the Cybertruck was shown with. In fact, they're not the wheels the Cybertruck has generally been shown with, and that's because the Cybertruck has been mainly seen with wheel covers on top of these wheels that look weird and futuristic and kind of match the look of the truck. Only problem is the wheel covers didn't actually work. Tesla tried them out and they would impact the sidewall of the tire, and so Tesla has recalled the wheel covers, and apparently there will be a future different design. That means these wheels are the Cybertruck's wheels with no cover. Frankly, I don't really love how they look. They're fine, they look nice enough, but they're kind of generic to sit on such a special, crazy looking body. Those wheel covers really did add to the air of mystique this truck had, and these wheels I don't think really look that great, but it's what the Cybertruck has. And next up, on the subject of exterior features you might not notice, take a look at the back of the front wheel arch. You can see right here there's a little cutout for the blind spot camera. Put on the turn signal, a blind spot camera turns on in the center screen. I'll show you that later, but the camera is mounted right here, and I love the fact that the little cutout for it is triangular to match the truck. Again, no circles if they could avoid it. Now, go to the rear wheel arch, and you can see right here there's a panel that appears to be cut out. That is your charge port. You tap on that, and it pops open automatically, and that's where you plug in the Cybertruck. It's hidden quite well, but it's there. And when the panel's open, you can see a cool profile image of the Cybertruck lit up inside the charge port area. Next up, another interesting exterior item with the Cybertruck is lighting. How do you put lights on a monolith? Well, up front, the answer seems pretty obvious. There's a light bar going across the front end, but there's actually more lighting than that. You turn on the lights and there's a hidden set of lights below the light bar that come on additionally to the light bar, and that lower hidden set is where the turn signals are located, as you can see. In the rear, the lighting is even more unusual, let's say. It comes from this giant bar going across the rear of the truck, and in normal operation, the lights are normal but small. The main brake lights are on the very edges of the rear of the truck, as you can see. They also include the turn signals, and then the third brake light is in the center. It's fine, it's a little small considering the size of the truck, but it works perfectly. The weird part is what happens when you turn on the headlights. Then the tail lights come on in the form of a giant light bar across the whole rear of the truck. But when you put on the brakes, the light bar turns off, and instead your traditional brake light setup turns on. It's strange because when the taillights are on and you put on the brakes, less light actually comes on than when you weren't braking. It's certainly an odd design, one that I have never seen before, but fitting a rather odd vehicle. Now, also worth pointing out in back, another hidden exterior adornment you wouldn't notice unless you're looking is this camera you can see mounted right in the middle of the rear. This is not a backup camera, but your rear view mirror. That is how it works in the Cybertruck. Let's talk about that. So why does the Cybertruck need a camera for a rear view mirror? Well, the answer is obvious. You can see it right here. There's no rear window. Actually, that's not entirely true. This is a tonneau cover that covers up the bed of this truck. So if you have stuff in here you don't want to get wet or damaged or stolen, you can cover up the bed with this cover. If you want the cover off, you just come back here, push a button, and then it automatically slides itself back. It's actually quite neat and nifty and quick, and it's a pretty cool design. It rolls itself back, and suddenly the bed is exposed. Now, when the bed is open like this, you do have a rear window, and you can see out the back of the truck, but apparently keeping the tonneau cover in place adds about 10% of range when you drive. So I suspect most owners will close the tonneau cover most of the time to maximize their range, unless they're actually using the bed with larger items. Of course, if you want to close the tonneau cover, that's no problem. You just press another button back here, and then it slides closed. Very easy, very simple to do, and now your bed is secure once again. It's really a pretty cool feature. Now, in addition to the tonneau cover situation back here, you do have one other button mounted the back of the Cybertruck, and that is the tailgate opener button. You push that, and then the tailgate automatically opens itself. That's pretty straightforward. It gives you access to the bed where there's a lot of cool features. So let's start. When you first look inside the bed to the left, there's this little panel here. You open it up and it's a series of outlets. You have household outlets in here, or you have a heavy duty one where you can plug in your washing machine and run it from your Cybertruck. Now, the other interesting thing in the bed of the Cybertruck is this giant panel in the bed floor actually lifts up, and you have a trunk back here where you can store, well, whatever you would normally store in a trunk. It's not as big as a traditional trunk in a sedan, but it's decent sized where you can put stuff if you don't want to keep it in the bed rolling around or whatever. You have this extra space. And there's even a drain plug at the bottom of this space, so if you wanted to use this extra trunk for like a cooler with ice, you could do that and then just pull the plug at the end and all the water will go out. Now, one drawback of this bed situation is the tailgate is quite large. It's quite tall, which means that when it folds down, it's quite long. And so it's pretty hard to reach past it to access this bed trunk or the rest of the bed. And sadly, Tesla didn't give us a bed step situation like you have in basically every other full-size pickup, where you can pull something out and then step right into your bed to access it. It's pretty hard actually to access the bed because of the tailgate and of course the height of the truck. No big deal, but worth pointing out. Other stuff in the bed, there's a lot of cargo tie downs like you would expect to see in, well, most pickup trucks, frankly. One cool feature is you have bed lighting. As you can see, lights on both sides that actually illuminate what's in the bed. More pickup trucks could use this feature. The Cybertruck has it and it's pretty nice. And I'll show you how to operate it from inside the truck in a little bit. By the way, one other interesting item back here, the tailgate. It is not power operated to go back up, so you do have to lift it into place, but it does have soft close, which means you don't have to slam it. You can just kind of get it near where it latches and then it will automatically close itself, which is a nice touch. And finally, the last hidden adornment on the outside of this truck, the door handles. Doesn't look like there are any door handles. How do you get into this truck? Well, the front one is mounted here on the B-pillar at the base. And it's actually pretty simple. You just push the door handle and then the door kind of pops out a couple of inches for you to grab and open up the rest of the way. So next up, we climb inside the Cybertruck. You open up the door, get in, and you discover it's not quite as insane in here as it is out there. The design is such a slap in the face that it would be hard to replicate that in the interior, and indeed it doesn't. But there are some very interesting and quirky things inside this truck. Let's start with, well, the general minimalism vibe in here. Just like other Tesla models, you don't have all sorts of swoopy trim everywhere and buttons all over everything. Instead, very minimalist. Very few buttons and switches basically anywhere in this interior. Again, like other Tesla models, so it's not that radical, but it is radical compared to other vehicles, just how minimalist and basic and simple it is in this interior. And the other interesting thing is that the angular theme has been carried over to the interior, not just outside. For example, the steering wheel is not, in fact, a wheel. You can see it's more of like a collapsed hexagon. There's no real curving to it, and it's all pretty angular and certainly unique compared to other vehicles. Now, I'll cover more unorthodox angled things in this interior in a second, but first, I want to talk more about the steering wheel, because steering is undoubtedly one of the most interesting things about the Cybertruck. That's because it uses something called steer-by-wire, which sounds very kind of boring and mechanical, high-tech, but the interesting part is you barely turn the steering wheel to turn the truck. So in your car, you turn the wheel like hand over hand 3 times and then you're all the way locked in one direction. In the Cybertruck, it's only half a turn and the entire steering is as far over as it goes. half a turn the other direction, the steering is as far as it goes. Totally unorthodox compared to other vehicles. We'll see how I like it when I get behind the wheel of the Cybertruck in a little bit. But one clear immediate benefit is it really works with Tesla's yoke steering wheel. There was a lot of complaints about going hand over hand turning a yoke. Well, you don't have that complaint if you don't ever have to go hand over hand because of the way the steering is set up, and that's the case in this truck. It solves that problem with a similar steering wheel to the yoke. Also worth pointing out, the Cybertruck has rear wheel steering in addition to front wheel, which dramatically improves the maneuverability of this giant truck. A lot of new luxury cars have rear wheel steering, but this does too, and it helps. But back to the interior weird angled stuff. The cup holders are not circular, as you can see. They are octagons. Even though your cups are circular, in the Cybertruck, your cup holders are not. Take a look over at the door panel and you can see a bunch of different angles on basically every surface. There is no attempt to smooth anything out with a curve. In fact, there really is basically nothing round anywhere in this interior. Even the dog in dog mode in the infotainment system, you can see he's like an angular pixelated dog instead of a usual circular curved dog, which just adds to the Cybertruck hilarity. And I really like it. The only thing I really found in here that is circular, the thumb controls on the steering wheel. You can see these are, well, traditional circles and wheel dials that turn like a circle. That's because Tesla borrows these from other Tesla models to put in the Cybertruck, and I guess they decided they didn't want to make specific hexagon-shaped steering controls just for the Cybertruck. It would have been too expensive, so those remain circles. Although it is worth pointing out, the camera icon to switch on the cameras on the steering wheel, that is a hexagon, and same deal on the infotainment screen, a hexagon for the camera. So they did put some attention to details like that, which is pretty cool to see. Most people probably wouldn't notice. Now, beyond all of the angles and the minimalism in this interior, once again, just like on the outside, there's no Tesla logos inside this truck. On the steering wheel, you have that profile image of the truck, sort of the Cybertruck triangle, and on the door sill, you have Cybertruck written in the cool Cybertruck font that Tesla's used in some marketing. But again, you won't find Tesla logos anywhere in here, just like on the outside. It is very unorthodox, just like the windshield. So let's talk about that next. The windshield in this truck, in order to make the shape work, it goes basically all the way to the front of the truck. Now, this is weird. You're not used to driving a car with a windshield that looks like this, and it creates actually some issues. One is cleaning the windshield. I don't know how you're going to get in this area to clean the bottom inside of the windshield or to dust off the top of the dashboard. It looks like hell for detailers. Good luck. The other issue that a long windshield like this creates, we've seen it in other cars, is the A-pillar becomes very large to support the windshield. That blocks your visibility. Now, to Tesla's credit, they put windows inside the A-pillar to make it a little easier to look out, but it doesn't really entirely solve the problem. You can clearly tell there's a lot of stuff blocked by this large A-pillar going pretty far into your line of sight, and I have a suspicion it's going to cause some Cybertruck pedestrian issues because you won't be able to see everything that's there. Next up, also on the subject of the windshield, the sun visors are very interesting. Because the windshield is so massive, it almost goes over directly where you're sitting. The visors are not mounted on the ceiling, but instead they're stuck to this plastic panel that comes out for the sensors for this truck. That in itself is unusual, but the strangest part is when you put down the sun visors to cover up the sun on the windshield, they actually reveal more windshield. You block some part of the windshield, but you get another part of the windshield. It is very unusual. The good news is there is extra sun visor that comes down from the visor in the form of an extra panel to block out even more sun if you like. Now, also worth pointing out, you have up here the button to turn on the hazard lights. It's worth mentioning the hazard lights being a separate button is a regulatory thing. You can't put the hazard light button in the screen. And so that's why all these cars with minimalist interiors and giant screens still have the hazard light button separate as you do here. This probably irked Tesla. They wanted to make it as minimalist as possible, but they still had to do a button for the hazard lights. Nonetheless, they did away with climate vents. You can see in this interior, there's no obvious climate vents. They are obviously there because you get air conditioning and heat in this truck just like any other vehicle, but they've completely made them invisible, which is an amazing effort towards minimalism that Tesla's really committed to. Next up on the door panel, you can see this button here you press to electronically open the door. It kind of pops it open and then you open it the rest of the way. This latch is a manual backup in case the electronic door popper fails. And then you also have your window switches here. The owner of this truck told me that the switches are mounted pretty far back and they're kind of in an uncomfortable place to reach, which is a little annoying. But worth pointing out, speaking of the windows, the front windows in this truck are crazy. The design of them has this crazy kinked angle to fit with the angle of the truck. It looks like no other front window I've ever seen. Very unusual. But next we move on to the controls in this truck, starting with the steering wheel. There are no stalks coming off the steering column for your turn signals or your windshield wipers like in most normal vehicles. Instead, your turn signals are mounted on the steering wheel. You can see them here, arrow to the left, arrow to the right. You also have a button here where you can flash the headlights. Over on the other side, you have your wipers here, as you can see, and you have your voice control feature here you can activate from the steering wheel. And this button turns on the camera system, opens it up in the center screen, like I mentioned before, but no stalks on the steering column at all. So you're probably wondering, how do you shift this vehicle into gear? How do you put it in drive or reverse? And the answer is, it's on the screen. So let's talk about the giant screen in the Cybertruck. Shifting into gear is over on the left side of the screen, and it's a function where you slide your finger in the direction where you want to travel. So you slide up, forward for drive, you slide back for reverse, and then park will turn on if you tap the center or if you just open your door. It's actually pretty intuitive. It works reasonably well, and you don't really think about how it's odd or unorthodox after just a little while using this truck. But beyond the gear swipey situation, there's a lot of other interesting items worth pointing out with this screen. Now, this screen in general will be pretty familiar to anybody who's spent time in a recent Tesla model. The Cybertruck has a very similar screen interface setup to other Teslas. There's just a different font that's supposed to be more futuristic, and there's a few features that other Tesla models don't have. I'm going to cover the most interesting. So let's start with the main screen. You see a side image of the truck, and check this out. If you double tap the window on this image, well, take a look.
Oh my God. Oh man, it didn't go through.
Yes, that's right. The glass breaks just like it did when Elon Musk first showed and demonstrated this truck 4 years ago. It's very cool to see that they've integrated that feature. Kind of a stupid little hidden Easter egg, but I'm all about the little quirks and features. Next up, here's an interesting item. You can open the glove box in the center screen. That's not different from other Teslas, but the glove box itself is. You open it and you can see it's actually a glove tray, or a glove drawer, if you will. That's where you keep your stuff that you'd keep in a glove box. When you want to close it, just press the button on the screen again, and it goes right back into where it belongs. A standard glove box would be too normal for the Cybertruck. Now, next up, also interesting in this screen, this is where you find the rear view mirror for this truck. Like I mentioned, and the tonneau cover is closed, you can't see behind you, so the rear view mirror is shown on the screen instead. Now, worth pointing out, the Cybertruck actually does come with a rear view mirror. That's regulatory, but the owner of this truck told me he removed it. It blocked his forward visibility, and he didn't really plan on driving with the tonneau cover open, and so he'd rather use the mirror inside the screen, which makes sense. And also worth pointing out, you can move the rear view mirror on the screen to a more convenient place if that's what you want to do. You can kind of choose where it is. Also worth pointing out, another cool Cybertruck feature in here, you can raise and lower the suspension. All Cybertruck models come with height adjustable suspension, and you can see various different options here from the entry height, which is the lowest to make it easier to get inside, all the way up to the highest height, which is for off-roading. And you can see right now the truck is going into its highest height, and boy does it get high. It can go from very low to very high. That highest setting is something like 17 inches of ground clearance to maximize its off-road capability. Now, beyond that, the rest of this screen is mostly your typical Tesla fare, and I did an in-depth look at the latest Tesla infotainment system in my recent review of the new Tesla Model 3. So you can watch that for a little bit more details on this infotainment system. But you do have the basics. For instance, you control the mirrors using the screen, and then also the little thumb dial on the steering wheel. You can see it puts the mirrors up or down. Same deal with controlling the position of the steering wheel. You navigate over to steering, and then you can move the wheel up or down using the dials, just like in other Tesla models. It's a very cool trick, but again, I've mentioned it in other reviews. You also have dog mode, like I mentioned, where you can keep the interior cool if you want to briefly run into a store, leave your dog in the car. Again, all the usual Tesla fare in this infotainment system. Now, with that said, one totally crazy piece of technology that this truck does not have is autopilot. Tesla's autopilot driver assist technology, which will slow down and speed up based on the car in front of you and also steer for you. This truck doesn't come with it. It does have a cruise control that will slow down or speed up based on traffic, but you have to do your steering. And the truck also doesn't have Tesla's full self-driving system or differential locks to enhance its off-road capability. I mention all these things together because Tesla says they're all going to be added to the Cybertruck with an over-the-air update, but they're not here now. So if you bought one of these, you've been driving it around for a few months already without any of these features that you probably expected, which is a little bit disappointing. Now, the final item that's interesting, worth noting in the interior up here, in the infotainment screen, you can open up the front trunk, which Tesla calls the Frunk. You just tap here where it says open frunk, and then you can see it pops open automatically up front, revealing a storage compartment. So, what is in the front trunk? Well, the answer is nothing, which is intentional because it's a storage compartment where you are supposed to put stuff. But there's a few interesting quirks worth pointing out. For one, Cybertruck is written across the back in the cool Cybertruck font, as you can see. You also have a little cap over on the side where you can add windshield washer fluid, a fairly normal thing that you still have to do in this otherworldly truck. And you also have a button where you can press and the front trunk will close. And apparently the front trunk will close on you. There's nothing preventing it from just closing on whatever you have in between the trunk and the car. So needless to say, don't stick your arm in there. It will be cut off. And next up, we move on to the back seat, and first getting into the back of the Cybertruck. Opening the rear doors about the same as the front door. You got a panel over here to the side, you push it, the door pops open, reveals itself for you, and you can open it the rest of the way. Cool thing here is the back doors open 90 degrees, so they really open far, which allows you easier ingress and egress getting in and out of the truck. Now, once you're back here, a couple of interesting quirks, and the biggest is actually a surprise. There's decent space back here. Given the overall length of this truck, I assumed there would be good leg room, knee room, hip room, that kind of stuff. And there is. But given the design of this truck, I thought headroom would be compromised, but it isn't. I'm pretty tall, and sitting back here, I can sit all the way straight up, and I have room for my head. I'm only an inch or two away from the glass above me, so it's not like there's a ton of space, but there's certainly enough for me to sit back here comfortably. Adults, children, whatever, they'll fit in the back of the Cybertruck. Now, the other notable item back here is the screen for rear passengers, which you can use to do a lot of different stuff. You have, for instance, music controls back here you can use to adjust the audio in the car. And you also have entertainment controls. You can turn on your favorite apps like Netflix or YouTube. And you have climate controls back here. Turning on the climate controls, the on button is an angled hexagon instead of a usual circle, which adds to the Cybertruckness. But beyond that, you can just adjust where the air comes out, the temperature, that sort of thing, and turn on your rear heated seats. That's your rear screen. Now, beyond all that stuff, the rear of the Cybertruck isn't particularly interesting or exciting. The only other interesting item worth pointing out is you can lift up the base of the seats for more storage. There's sort of a hidden little tab you can pull back here, you pull it, and then the seat base rises up and you can use the back for storage instead of passenger seating if you don't have people, but instead you have stuff. A lot of other trucks have that, but it's nice to see it here. So those are your quirks and features, and now on to the basics of the Cybertruck if you want to hear the general details. So right now there are two versions of the Cybertruck available. There's sort of a regular one, the Cybertruck, and then there's the high-performance Cyber Beast with more power. This is the regular Cybertruck. It has 600 horsepower, it does 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, and it starts around $82,000. It also has about 340 miles of range. Now, if you upgrade to the Cyber Beast, you get about 835 horsepower. You do 0 to 60 in 2-point-something seconds, which makes it the fastest or quickest truck of all time. You have a base price of around $102,000 and a total range of about 300 miles, a little bit less than in the standard truck. Now, both of these versions of the Cybertruck can tow up to 11,000 pounds, which is a pretty strong number, although obviously that will significantly diminish range. It's also worth pointing out that both of these versions are significantly more expensive than Tesla said they would be when these trucks were first announced back in 2019. Between $20,000 and $40,000 more expensive, depending on the version. It's a pretty steep price increase, but also one that pretty much everybody expected. Now, it's also worth pointing out that Tesla claims there is an even cheaper version of the Cybertruck that is still coming out. It is a single-motor, rear-wheel drive Cybertruck that will only tow about 7,500 pounds and obviously have a lower base price compared to the four-wheel drive, more high-performance, more powerful versions. Tesla claims that's coming in 25, but we're all skeptical about Tesla's claims of time at this point. Now, the Cybertruck is built in Texas at Tesla's Gigafactory near Austin. It's about 224 inches long, which is enormously long for a vehicle, but pretty standard for a full-size pickup truck, and it weighs about 6,900 pounds, which is fairly significant. Also worth pointing out, the Cybertruck right now is only available here in North America. This hasn't been exported to Asia or Europe yet, and given some of its regulatory challenges in those markets, I have a strong suspicion it never will be, and it will always be confined to North America. A special treat we get here, the Tesla Cybertruck. And with that, let's get behind the wheel. All right, driving the Tesla Cybertruck. I have wanted to drive the Cybertruck ever since it was first revealed, as everyone did, back at the end of 2019. Now, in that time, they said it'd be out in 21. Here we are, 3.5 years after it was revealed, and it is finally out. Now, when they first revealed it, I said, I think I had a video or tweet that I said I didn't think they'd be able to make the Cybertruck in production form actually look like that. And there have been some changes to the concept Cybertruck to get it production ready. But to Tesla's credit, it's pretty close to how they said it was going to look, or maybe to Tesla's detriment because it is heinously ugly. But it's also just plain cool. I think it's both things at once. So I'll get to the driving experience in a second, but I'll say this. I have been watching from the sidelines over the last year as people have talked about towing capacity and hauling capacity and all of this truck stuff about the Cybertruck. And frankly, I just think these discussions are moot because people are buying this to be cool. That's the whole reason. Nobody cares if it tows or hauls. And frankly, that's also true of its competitors. The 6 guys in my neighborhoods with Ford Raptors, I've never seen them dirty. I've never seen them hooked on to anything to tow. People buy these trucks to be cool. Now, when the Cybertruck was first announced, Elon was like, it's going to be a Ford F-150 competitor and it's going to be useful in the fields. Well, it's become clear that it really is more of a lifestyle, expensive thing for rich people. But once that became clear, I think we should have stopped all discussion about stupid stuff like towing capacity and start talking about how cool it is. And this is so cool. I've driven around several of these in traffic, just seen them on the roads. people lose it. They take pictures, they're so excited. And I think a lot of the arguments about, oh, it can't tow, oh, it's gonna run out of battery, are coming from Raptor owners who are just mad that something has upstaged them in the pickup world. This is cooler than any other truck. And I think if you paid 100 grand for a TRX or 120 for a Raptor R, you would be upset that you just got upstaged by a stupid electric car, you know, whose company is from California, you know. But it is. It upstages everything because it's so cool. Okay, so let's talk driving experience. First thing that's interesting about the Cybertruck is steer-by-wire. This doesn't sound particularly sexy or cool, but it really has a profound effect on the driving experience. And that's because the steering wheel basically can only turn over a half turn, and that's the full amount it could turn. In a normal car, you can do a couple of around the wheels. Well, in this, the steering is directly connected to how far you turn the wheel, and it happens quick. And the driving experience is very interesting as a result. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but I have to say, just driving this thing around now for like a half hour, I kind of prefer it to normal car driving. Why am I doing hand over hand, turn over turn? I don't really need to do that. This truck is great proof that it actually just works out okay in regular driving with this steer-by-wire where you don't turn it much. And I'm surprised how well it works once you get used to it. There's a couple of interesting thing. I love this steer-by-wire. You just a simple turn and then you're good. There's no hand over hand, and it really neutralizes the drawback of the crazy yoke steering wheel because you're not doing hand over hand turns. It's surprisingly great. Now, one interesting thing about the Cybertruck is it actually steers pretty well. The steering, because of the steer-by-wire and because Tesla just generally does a good job of this, you have quite direct steering. So you turn the steering wheel and it's pretty quick to make it turn and go in that direction. Now, it's a huge vehicle. So it weighs almost 7,000 pounds. And so ultimately, it's still going to be pretty heavy. It's not like it's going to handle incredibly well around like bends and corners, you know, if you're taking it on mountain canyon roads. But it steers better than you'd expect, and it feels a little bit more limber and nimble than you might expect, particularly given that it also accelerates pretty well. Now, this is not the Cyber Beast version of the truck. It has only 600 horsepower. That's fine. 0 to 60 in 4 seconds in a vehicle that weighs 7,000 pounds. That's really all you need. Tesla has delivered quite a few of them. I've seen probably a dozen just regularly driving here around San Diego, and I was in New York last week and I saw 2 or 3 in New York. They're not going to be rare soon. The excitement factor will wear off like it did for the C8 Corvette. But for now, it is definitely the craziest thing on the road, and people just go absolutely nuts seeing it. The driving experience is probably the least interesting part about the truck. Aside from the very long windshield and the kind of problematic A-pillars, aside from the steer-by-wire and the weird, you know, mirror as a camera thing, other than that, driving it is really not all that crazy. It looks crazy. It has some crazy features. There's a lot of weird stuff about the truck, but from a driving perspective, just sitting here driving it, once you get used to steer-by-wire, it's a fairly traditional vehicle to own and operate and use, which I think is the point. You don't want people to have some steep learning curve of actually driving it. You want the kind of the styling and the design to speak for itself in terms of how crazy it is. All right, I'm gonna juice it here. Woohoo! Yeah, acceleration is just fine with the in the non-Cyber Beast. I'm sure it's amazing in the Cyber Beast, but frankly, we've all gotten used to electric cars doing 0 to 60 in 2 point whatever. It's really not special anymore. This truck is special for a lot of other reasons beyond its acceleration. In terms of size, I think that's something that a lot of people are gonna be curious about. It's big. If you're in a city area, you may not want to be driving around in such a large vehicle all the time. You're going to be hauling around a large bed in back you may not be using just for the sake of being cool. I'm not really sure that's the right move. But certainly the most interesting, most exciting parts about the truck come from all the stuff I showed you before and not necessarily from driving it. And I think that's a good thing. You don't have to, even though you have to adapt in your mind to this crazy design, you don't have to really make any concessions or adaptations to use the truck. You can use it reasonably well. You just have to get used to steering by wire, which frankly I think is great. And so in the end, I think this thing is just cool. It just is cool. And it's amazingly exciting to be driving it around finally after all this time. And the response on the road is just wild. And the market has spoken also with the demand for it. This is cool. People are interested. People love it. People think it's crazy. And boy is it. And so that's the Tesla Cybertruck. Say what you will about this, but it is incredibly head-turning, impressive to see, impressive to just be around. This is one of the craziest vehicles ever to exist, and it's just plain cool, incredibly head-turning. There is nothing else like it on the road. A crazy experience inside and out, and now it's time to give the Cybertruck a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 73 out of 100, which places the Cybertruck here against various other similar vehicles and other Tesla models. The Cybertruck wins against all of these, but mainly due to such a high weekend score. It's immensely cool right now, an absolute showstopper. As the Cybertruck gets more common though, and that cool factor falls, I suspect the R1T will end up with a higher overall score. It's just a more well-rounded truck, a little quicker, a little better looking, a little more practical, a little cheaper. For now though, Cybertruck is king.